No, that's enough. No!
Bold statement time. I would say this movie is comparable to the inventiveness of the early works of Peter Jackson. Yes, we are talking about the movie Clawed, aka Sludge, directed and co-written by Steve Taylor. So the story here is based on this kind of wilderness in America somewhere, and there is this kind of toxic sludge which is on this kind of like this kind of national park type place, and it has birthed this strange toxic sludge swamp type monster. And we have two concurrent storylines within the movie. We have a group of geology students that are there with their kind of lecturer doing some sort of tests, trying to kind of figure out some weird seismic activity. And then we have this other guy who we learn has cancer, and he's ultimately coming to this kind of like this wilderness area to drink and smoke himself to death. And he's there with his kind of girlfriend who's trying to kind of talk him round. And he comes kind of in contact with this mysterious sludge, which seems to have some type of healing properties to it. But ultimately, there are some adverse ones as well. So ultimately, it becomes this kind of creature on the loose, this weird, slimy, gooey monster, tearing a swathe for anyone that comes in its path. Including lots of kind of random people and this kind of this main group of college kids. So what do we think about Clawed, aka Sludge? So as I said in the opening, this does remind me of things like Brain Dead, because the inventiveness in this here on such a shoestring budget is clearly very kind of like prevalent. And I've got to say, hats off to the filmmakers for actually trying to make this something obviously where they're clearly having to really kind of think outside the box and kind of be very creative in the kind of the filmmaking, and some quite fun and over the top kind of like gore effects. It has some kind of very kind of eccentric use of the camera, shall we say, which I thought was quite fun, and doesn't shy away from showing you plenty of character deaths and actually having a degree of thought on it as well. I like the way this monster is described as a kind of a living embodiment of disease. And it's kind of ultimately how the kind of it attacks kind of healthy people, because it's essentially a kind of living disease monster ultimately. So there's some good ideas here. Let's go into a little bit further on it. First of all, the monster itself. It's a weird looking creature because it just looks like it's kind of like put together through various different kind of props. But for me, I've got to say it works, because it is meant to be this kind of like this unholy mess of like sludge and kind of bits and bobs. It looks like it's kind of like pieced together some sort of like animal bones and stuff like that, but I feel it actually kind of works. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of a little bit static in places, obviously. Like I said, it's a very low budget movie, but of course the actual design of it, I think, works with the film. It isn't, I think the cover of this movie kind of makes it look like a kind of Bigfoot movie. It really isn't. But I have to say, I actually thought the actual design was quite good. This kind of like oily, sort of like black goo here that was quite fun. And some of the sound effects are quite amusing, I've got to say, and kind of work. There's kind of like this constant kind of like slopping kind of goo effect that you have when the sludge is on the screen as well. I thought was quite fun. And I've got to say, the acting is probably better than I thought it was going to be at the outset of this movie. The acting isn't great, don't get me wrong, and there are some poor performances, but for this kind of low budget indie horror film, I've got to say I thought the actual cast did an okay job, and there are some kind of quite funny exchanges between some of the characters as well. So there's some quite kind of funny lines of dialogue. But the thing that I feel, the two things maybe that the biggest positives for me are the inventiveness of how they use kind of like the gore effects, because clearly on such a low budget, you're not going for a level of realism, but you're just going for that kind of the OTT, real kind of like schlocky goodness that you'll come to expect in, things like Brain Dead, maybe the Evil Dead, original Evil Dead movie. But those movies are high budget compared to this one. But nonetheless, I felt that it was kind of effective, and that kind of really bleeds into my second thing. I'd say the other thing, it's just a fun film. It's a fun, absolutely bonkers movie because it doesn't make a lick of sense, but it is actually a real fun B-movie experience, and that's going to be the key thing with this movie. If you're a fan of B-movies, then this may be one to check out because it is just a kind of completely bonkers. But now let's get into some negatives. So this movie is a bit like a selection box of chocolates. There are some tasty morsels here, but there's also the coffee cream that no one likes. There's that hard toffee one that, you know, is always left to last because there are some stinkers here as well. And I'm going to say this of a place of love, but there are some, this has got some of the most legitimately bad editing I've ever seen in a film. The editing in this movie is horrendous. Like quick edits that just simply don't make sense, and it's just so poorly edited together. It's really jarring. The second thing is the sound mixing here. So you'll have different kind of angles of shots, but you'll hear that in some shots of the same scene, you'll hear like a kind of a ambient buzz, but you'll flip to another shot and it won't be there. It'll flip back to the original shot, and for example, the buzz will be there again. So the actual sound mixing is horrible. You know, obviously, again, lack of budget, but it's. I'm surprised this wasn't picked up. The camera work is truly awful in places. I mean, it's the constant need to have these real close-ups and stuff like that, and really kind of over-the-top kind of shaky cam, things like that. So basically, the majority of my issues on this one are on a technical standpoint, because I feel the work that's been done on a low budget kind of movie like this, with the kind of the effects and the kind of the fun nature of it, but it's really let down by some just truly poor kind of technical work ultimately. Now, I did mention I kind of like the acting. However, there are some evidence where the Uli is quite poor. There's actually a few instances where you'll see characters that actually look at the camera, and there's not like a third person you know, meta thing where people are talking to the camera, but you'll see actors kind of glance at the camera a few times and stuff. So this is clearly not you know, the professional kind of actors. There are a couple of cameos here. Felissa Rose, Tiffany Shepis, from kind of more seasoned kind of like B-movie horror aficionados will know who they are, but for the most part, obviously the main cast are kind of relative unknowns here. The actual story itself, like I said, doesn't really make a lot of sense, but just go with it, because it is a kind of a lot of fun. So ultimately, this movie is a bit of a fun ride if you like your B-movies. If you like your B-movies, then there's a lot to enjoy here, I feel. But it is inherent cheapness, and I've seen some of the reviews on this movie, and they really chastise it for its very low budget. So you kind of got to go into this movie expecting that. So be warned, this is a very low budget film, so don't be expecting anything kind of like too polished here, because it really is guerrilla filmmaking. But I don't really mind as much, because obviously it's as best as that film is going to get with that kind of level of budget, apart from the bits that I've mentioned in my opinion. I mean, the dialogue is a little bit horrible and stuff like that, and the actual narrative, the way this kind of hangs is the best way to describe it. It doesn't really make a lot of sense in it. The movie actually takes a little while to get going, because the narrative structure this movie has, the kind of the framing device is poor, and you know, it sort of takes a while for the actual story to get going. And there's some horrible visual effects in regards to the kind of digital effects. That's absolutely horrible. But I gotta say, like I said, this movie to me was a lot of fun. So I actually kind of can enjoy it for you know, a good B movie with some kind of very low budgets. So I'll give this movie a 5 out of 10. So if you're a B movie fan, which you must be if you watch this channel, or there's a good chance that you are, then you may want to check it out. So 5 out of 10 from me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.